Hello and welcome to this podcast on planning obligations and Section 106 agreements. I'm Bob McGeady and I'm going to be guiding you through for the duration. Um, what I wanted to do really was to start by trying to set Section 106 agreements in some context, because I think the danger is that we just look at these things as another transaction that we're involved in. But actually, I think sometimes by just standing back and seeing where it all fits into A, the planning process, and B, the economy at large, maybe gives us a better perspective on what we routinely deal with on a daily basis. So, without further ado, back in the year 2000, the Audit Commissioners at then was produced a document called Probity in Planning, and that was an in-depth look at the planning process by auditors. And of course, auditors are notorious for looking at process, but not necessarily looking at what outcomes there are. So, for example, one of the recommendations that came from this report was that draft Section 106 agreements would be sent out within 14 days of the committee resolution. They would be approved within 14 days by the developer and then completed a week after that. So as you can see, just a little bit unrealistic. However, there were some good matters that came out of it. So one of the things that they spoke about was probity. And obviously, this is a big area um, where probity is a massive issue, or can be a massive issue in the planning process. So when I act for objectives, for example, I can virtually script the first half hour of any meeting where everybody's on the take, planning permission is being sold, etc., etc. Well, as we know, that's not the case. However, planning permissions are routinely bought and sold on a daily basis by means of a planning obligation. It's a risk area for local authorities, and one of the not so stunning conclusions was that where local authorities had a policy and also had the support of their members, then they would tend to negotiate better and more planning obligations than those that didn't. Now, obviously, these days, most local authorities do have a policy or are in the process of adopting one. Um, the use of planning obligations, which then leads to the grant of planning permission, obviously enhances land value, and that obviously makes people act in particular ways, because clearly landowners, developers wish to maximise the value of the land and obviously pay as little as they can in order to get planning permission. But of course, if we approach this on the basis that a planning obligation is there to ameliorate the impact of the development on the public, so that the public is at least no worse off than before the development occurs, then clearly that is something to focus on for those of us who negotiate and complete 106 agreements. So, what am I going to cover today? Well, a bit more on general context in a minute. We're then going to do some basic law, so go right back to basics and look at what you can actually achieve by means of a 106 agreement. We'll look at the test for validity, both in terms of policy, past and present, and also the attitude of the courts to those tests. Then we'll start to look at some practical issues, so around, who needs to be a party, some issues arising out of heads of terms and drafting that can occur, look at costs, monitoring and completion of 106 agreements, and finally a quick look at the end on enforcement of agreements.